Welcome to another episode of GBLOC's Go Deeper interview series. It's my absolute pleasure to have our guest here today, David Kobrosky. He is the founder and CEO of Intros AI, which connects communities in new AI-powered ways. He's also a cancer warrior and supporter of other cancer warriors. He just finished raising 10K from 256 donors to help cover the treatments of other cancer survivors while undergoing his own treatment. David, it's what a pleasure it is to have you here today.
Wonderful to be here. And I think thanks to the thoughtful intro. We are still going through that process as far as the fundraiser and whatnot. And so thanks for giving the shout.
100%. Who knows? Maybe this will inspire some G blockers to be a part of supporting your fundraising efforts. So happy to provide that shout out. So let's dive into our first question. Tell us your why. What do you consider to be your purpose or your mission in the world, and what experiences in your life shape that?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest blockers for human progress is the right people finding and connecting with each other. And also the biggest blockers of empathy, right? The more that people can have those interactions across different types of human divides, the better. So that's always been something that mattered a lot to me, and trying to bridge those gaps, if you will. So most of my day job, at least, is around that, right? So building intros to find and create those connections. And as far as what stemmed that, I mean, I think it's kind of tough. It goes back pretty far. I threw my first event when I was 13. It was I think it was around my bar mitzvah. Of course, everyone has like bar mitzvah event, or it's like party or whatever. I think have to celebrate. And then I was like, wait, this is, kids like this. So I started throwing concerts where I get local friends who are local artists to come play. And then eventually when I was 15, I rented a yacht, and I sold I think it was 300-400 tickets. And I got a bunch of DJs on there. And then eventually it was a festival. And this is all in high school, just build different types of communities. And then got online communities, and that kind of led to my other works around working with different types of creators to build their communities out before starting my own company around the space. So I think I've always been someone who enjoys connecting other people, and the craziest thing about it is this unlimited upside when you make a connection, right? If you connect to people, and then they end up, I think I keep track of all the connections I make between friends. So I connected 2 friends who went on to raise, I think it was $40 million from the best VCs in the world, and to build really meaningful product. Because they just work so well together, and that took 5 minutes to make, but then the upside is some really potentially impactful product or outcome. So all that said is I don't know exactly what David purpose is, but it's definitely in that realm of connecting people together.
I love that. Thank you. And that's so fun. I think you and I share that in common. I've also been building communities since I was in my teens. So almost it's no surprise. It's and now I'm a community director, of course.
Exactly.
So what is the one big idea you would like to imbue in the world, and why? What do you hope it happen as a result?
The biggest one is this idea around passing your values down to the next generation of people, and that there's different ways of doing that. So if your value is around human connection, you could run a community, right? And that everyone in that community can kind of benefit from from those connections that you facilitate in some different way, whether it's holding an event, or it's messaging that you share with them, or it's values that you pass and kind of describe to them. You could also work on a company that thinks about community. It's a different approach, but it's a different medium to pass down those values. And if human connection isn't your thing, totally fine. But I think it could be another value of yours. If you care about safety, then working on a security engineering product kind of fits in that realm. So just being aware that whatever you spend your time and energy on actually contributes directly to the values you're passing down to those who interact either with you or those products. You can have kids and you teach these values to them. There's different ways of passing down. You can write a book about that topic, or that leads to people getting more of that value instilled in them. But just the idea that I think we are all here in some way to pass down values to others, and that's how we make dents in the world in some way. It's not like biological evolution is really changing that fast, but the value that humans have is pretty fast moving, and we can actually impact that through the things that we spend and build with our time.
Absolutely. And what are the ways in which you cultivate meaningful connections? And what do you hope will happen as a result of that?
So I guess one of course is through through my own company intros, where it's not necessarily me doing it, but it's trying to create the frameworks for others to also create these connections. But I have an intro time in my calendar. It's like an hour a week where it's like, all right, who should meet each other in my world? And I just got to think about it. And then I have like a little, a spreadsheet of everyone I've ever met, really. I've been keeping that since I was 15 or so. There's some book called Never Eat Alone. I think got me inspired by that. Really good book. Really suggest it for other community or networky people out there. But yeah, having that spreadsheet lets me kind of find and filter and figure out which people should be connecting with each other. So sometimes the answer is just very manual, though. It's like really just being intentional and thinking deeply about who in my world should be meeting, and then trying to get them to connect. So different methods for the same thing. And then of course you have like events and as I mentioned, the brunches that I've hosted in the past, where we find reasons and excuses to bring people together. I think there's not enough. I think not enough people will. There should always be an excuse to celebrate or bring people together. So for you mentioned the fundraiser earlier. The whole idea was people would bid on different hairstyles. So one was frosted tips, one was a mohawk, and frosted tips won. And then at the end of that, we shaved it all off. And the fun part about it is I got to invite a bunch of friends to come and help shave off. So everyone kind of took part of the trimmer and shaved off part of my head. And it was like a good reason for people to gather with me as a mutual friend between everyone. But because of that, a lot of people made friends out of that. And then I was kind of matching people up. So it's a different way to connect people, but it was still the same result of these like new ties being formed.
That's awesome. And that's so creative. I think I really appreciate how much creativity you put into creating connections, and if for those of you watching, if you haven't watched the member spotlight, David shares a little bit more about about his brunches in there, but this idea of brunch or like voting on a hairstyle, like that, those are creative ways to create connection. So I appreciate the creativity you put into that.
And I think like what you're doing too with both GBLOC and even this podcast itself is the same same method. It's like, how do we get what is a creative way to get more GBLOC members to connect? And one of them might be, it's like, honestly, this, right? Like I would, now you do this, I'm probably gonna go out there and try to look at the other spotlights. Oh, like that's the person I'd love to connect. And then boom, like this happens, but that doesn't happen without you as that catalyst. So I think that it's really, yeah, it's such a hard thing to do, but you do it great. And I think GBLOC does a great job of it.
Thank you. Oh man. So what do you consider to be the contributions you make in the world? So definitely there's the piece around connection. So that is super obvious, but is there anything else or any way else you see yourself, how you see making contributions into the world?
I think every action that someone takes is it's like a vote for the way you want the world to be and look like. I forget where I heard that. I really like that though. So yeah, I like to think that just me existing or anyone existing like contributes more of that person's light to the world. Yeah, because connection is honestly probably
is your main one. That's right. But I appreciate
especially
the thought about you just being you can be a contribution, and you talked about values being really important, right? So whether it be embodying empathy, thoughtfulness, even creativity can be a contribution, because that's what adds energy in life to things that may because life can get mundane when we're just kind of routine in our little boxes, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I really so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
At least that's what I see based on what you've shared.
And I think it's exactly it. And so, the reason that someone just being themselves leads to that is because naturally you're going to interact with other people who will emulate or rub off on someone, right? It's like someone holds the door for you, you're going to be like, oh, like later on that day, you're like, yeah, no, I'll hold the door for someone else. You just kind of do it, right? It's not necessarily
Yeah.
reciprocity to that person, but it's reciprocity to the universe. So it's like if you know, maybe you don't really, maybe your mission isn't to make the world cleaner, but you pick up a piece of trash and someone sees that, it's one of those like butterfly type effects, and those happen. And then also it's also not just a vote for the way you want the world to be, but it's also a vote for the future version of yourself. You do that 3 or 4 times, then eventually it just, you know, becomes part of you. So then it's, you know, so it's like you kind of change yourself in that way as well. So I think so. Thought is aside, even if it's not explicit, I definitely have these other like micro identities aside from human connection that somehow gets put more out into the ether, I guess.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, I'm going a little off book, but like I'm really curious about generosity and what I see as a thread in, or something, at least a value that I'm getting from what you're sharing, is generosity is a big part of what's important to you. And what, one, would you agree with that? And also, where do you think that comes from? Like, what do you think influenced you to kind of think in that way and orient yourself in that way?
I think a lot of it comes from being, yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think I'm generous, but I don't think I'm particularly generous. Like,
Okay.
uh, but I think I'm a good host, like hosting events, right?
Mm.
So I think I'm more empathetic than I am generous. So I like,
Interesting.
so you're at a host, someone comes over, you kind of you're aware of them, and you're like, okay, how do I make sure this person's experience is good? I'm sure you probably hosted tons of events and like
Yeah.
before a lot of that mentality. I think is something. I'm a middle child, and it's definitely, I don't know why, but for a reason, whenever I bring this up, people are like, oh, like what birth order are you? And it just comes up. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but I remember there's a story in like 4th grade, I think it was. Um, and my teacher, I only found this out because my mom told me, my teacher told my mom about this, that like I'd ask these questions in class where like I already knew the answer to. Like I think it was like some, wasn't too hard of a class. It was like, it was like a 4th grade math or something. And I asked questions that once again, I knew the answer to, but I thought that others around me didn't quite know the answer to. So I'd ask it as a way to like have the teacher better explain it. And then I would do that probably 3, 4 times a class. And I kept doing that throughout high school. I remember kids would like, and I didn't really do this too consciously, but I remember a friend looked at my like paper in freshman year of high school, like, dude, like you're getting good grades. Why are you asking those questions? I was like, oh, well, like teachers are doing that kind of job describing it. There's people here who are definitely left behind. It's kind of bothering me. So I think it's more of just like a sensitivity to people's other reactions around me. So maybe I think it's more empathy than it is. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's a good question.
A
I mean,
good question. Yeah,
yeah,
it might be an interesting one to explore.
yeah.
Um, so tell us a little bit about what communities you're part of and why. You know, how do they add value to your life?
I am in so many communities.
Maybe
um,
pick your top three.
yeah,
How about that?
yeah, no,
Or
that's
the
good.
three that you're the most engaged in.
Yeah, no, I like that. So for I guess better or worse, a lot of the ones I'm currently focused on or in are like more tech or like founder related, just because that's where like most of my headspace is at. Um, that said, I think people don't appreciate enough how like dynamic and fluid the communities we're part of are. You know, one day, if I'm traveling somewhere, maybe I am like a my identity or the community I'm a part of. When I worked remote Costa Rica years ago for like a month. That was tons of fun. But I was like the American kid who's like hanging out. Like if I met another American, like, wow, like you're another American in Costa Rica. That's so cool. We're both here, and that's like not a big deal at all. And the fact
Mm-hmm.
that if I was in like New York and like I see like, oh, you're another American, that doesn't really matter because there's nothing special about that in the context of New York. But in the context of you traveling somewhere else where that isn't as common, and you have all this like this understanding of each other's background and whatever shared experience in a way that feels out of place, like that actually is really meaningful in that context.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of funny how that changes so much. So at the moment, I am a member of this co-working space, and that matters, right? Like I think and then later on today it'll be something different. There's a newsletter I'm starting to get into around like comics. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but like that's a light touch community I'm now a part of and I'm pretty engaged in, even though the way I engage there is a little more apart or aloof than like the way I engage in different Slack or like in-person communities. But it's still a
Yeah.
network that if I met someone who read that newsletter, I feel very connected to that person, even though we've never
Mm,
met before. So it's like this weird thing around shared experience that even if it's async, it's like almost potential shared experience that once understood and seen, we feel connected to each other. So there's all these like potential communities I'm also part of. So I have a hard time like just identifying myself with certain communities. It's such a hard topic to like understand because it ties into your identity, ties in with like all these questions around what defines a community that I still don't know the answers to. So it's a hard
yeah.
question.
Yeah. Um, I, I I agree. I agree that there is a lot of nuance when it comes to community and identity, and especially because there are like we are more than just one thing, right?
Right.
And I think yeah, and it's also thinking about how we show up in different communities, and yeah, those are some really interesting thought pieces for us to think about. So, last question: if you were running GBLOC for one day, what would you do with the community and why?
Oh, this is good.
Maybe outside of
Intros.
the intro, say hi.
Um, do I have unlimited money?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. All right. That matters. So we definitely want to fly everyone to the same place.
Nice.
Like, yeah, we have all the money. Like, might as well make it like an in-person thing that is fully covered and private jetted out everywhere, right? And I think the experience would be at least one third like meditation and retreat, and then I think
Hmm.
maybe another third mastermindy, where it's like very intentionally grouped together groups where people can like really dive in. We have each of them has like a little facilitator. That would be great.
Yeah.
What does Camp GBLOC look like? And then finally, I want a performer. I want like this like EDM or some type of like high energy type of way to finish off the experience, and then like time after for everyone to just kind of like hang out and reflect in like a pretty unstructured way. Um,
Wicked. I
yeah,
love that. Let's see if we can make that happen.
one day.
Um, I'll put it into my book. So before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to share with the community with GBLOC?
As I mentioned, love human connection. So reach out if you like humans connecting and want to chat. I think you all big fan of GBLOC and GBLOC members. So because what makes these types of communities special is that otherwise that connection doesn't happen. So here to jam with other GBLOCers. Is there a
Sound
name for a
it
member?
can be now.
Blockers? Yeah,
Yeah, I like
I
that.
love this one there.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being part of GBLOC.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me be part of GBLOC. Thanks, Sheila.